The morning of my wedding, my mother stood behind me in the bridal suite, her fingers working through my hair with the same gentle precision she'd used when I was 7, sitting on the worn carpet of our first apartment. Her reflection met mine in the mirror, and for a moment I saw both of us suspended in time, the woman I was becoming and the woman who had shaped me, layer by careful layer, like a sculpture with soft clay. "Perfect," she whispered, sliding the last pin into place. Her perfume, white shoulders, the same bottle she'd worn for 20 years, wrapped around us both like an invisible veil. She pressed her cheek against mine, careful not to smudge my makeup, and I felt the slight tremor in her hands that she thought I wouldn't notice. My mother, who never cried, who faced down landlords and bill collectors with steel in her spine, was fighting tears. "Mom," I said softly, reaching up to squeeze her hand. "No," she said, pulling back with a small laugh, dabbing at her eyes with the handkerchief she'd tucked in her sleeve. "Not yet. Save it for the ceremony." That was my mother, always managing the moment, orchestrating emotions like a conductor with an invisible baton. Even joy had its proper time and place in her world, measured out in careful doses, never excessive, never uncontrolled. I loved her for it then, this woman who had built our life from nothing, who had taught me that dignity wasn't about what you had, but how you carried yourself through the not having. The photographer knocked, and suddenly the room filled with my bridesmaids, their laughter bright as champagne bubbles. My mother stepped back into the shadows, but I could feel her watching, always watching, with that particular intensity she had, as if she could protect me through sheer force of observation. Outside, I could hear cars arriving, doors slamming, voices carrying across the garden where we'd set up the ceremony. Marcus's family had insisted on the venue, his mother's country club, all white columns and manicured lawns that rolled down to a man-made lake. "It's what we've always dreamed of from Marcus," his mother had said, her hand on my arm, her smile so warm I'd felt guilty for the flutter of discomfort in my stomach. "And now for you too, dear." My mother had been there for that conversation, sitting perfectly straight in her best dress, the navy one she'd bought second-hand and altered herself until it looked like it had been tailored on Savile Row. She'd smiled and nodded and said how generous they were, how blessed we all were. But in the car afterward, she'd been quiet for a long time before saying, "Remember, Anna, gratitude is a gift you give, not a debt you owe." I hadn't understood what she meant then. I was too caught up in the fairy tale of it all. Marcus with his easy laugh and gentle hands, his family's embrace that felt like stepping into a warm bath after years of cold showers. They'd welcomed me with an enthusiasm that felt almost desperate in its intensity, as if I was exactly what they'd been waiting for, the missing piece to complete some family portrait they'd been trying to compose. The car had come 3 months before the wedding. Marcus and I had been living together in his downtown apartment, the one his parents had bought him after law school, and I'd been taking the bus to my job at the museum. It was fine. I'd been taking buses my whole life, knew the routes like the lines on my palm. But his parents had noticed. "This is ridiculous," his father had said over dinner one Sunday. "Our daughter-in-law-to-be standing at bus stops in the rain." He'd said it like it was a personal affront to the family honor. 2 weeks later, Marcus had led me down to the parking garage, his hand over my eyes, giddy as a child with a secret. When he pulled his hand away, there it was, a silver Honda Civic, not new but gleaming, with a red bow on the hood that was trying so hard to make it look like a commercial that I'd laughed. "My parents want you to have this," he'd said, pulling me close. "They love you, Anna. We all do." The keys had felt heavy in my hand, heavier than keys should feel. But Marcus was beaming, and behind him I could see his parents watching from their car, his mother actually clapping her hands together with delight. So I'd smiled and cried the appropriate tears of joy and driven home to show my mother. She'd walked around the car slowly, running her fingers along the hood, checking the tires like she knew what she was looking for. "His parents gave this to you?" "To us," I'd corrected, though Marcus had been clear. The title was in my name, a gift to me specifically, his mother had insisted, "for the independent woman we're so proud to welcome to our family." My mother had nodded, that careful nod that meant she was filing information away for later examination. It's very generous, she'd said finally. Very generous indeed. The weeks leading up to the wedding became a blur of fittings and tastings, of place cards and flower arrangements. My mother threw herself into the preparations with an intensity that surprised me. She, who had always been so practical, so resistant to excess, suddenly cared about the exact shade of ivory for the table runners, the precise arrangement of baby's breath in my bouquet. You only get married once, she'd said, when I'd questioned the third revision to the seating chart. It should be perfect. Marcus's mother had been delighted to have such an enthusiastic collaborator. They'd spent hours together, these two women who couldn't have been more different. My mother with her careful speech and measured movements, his mother with her tennis club laugh and casual references to trips to Europe. But they'd found common ground in their determination to make the wedding flawless. I'd catch them sometimes, heads together over fabric samples or venue photos, and something would pass between them, a look I couldn't quite read. It reminded me of watching animals communicate in a frequency beyond human hearing, messages transmitted in glances and gestures that meant nothing to anyone else observing. Your mother is wonderful, Marcus's mother would say, squeezing my hand, so invested in making sure everything's right. She loves Anna, my mother would respond, that same smile she wore when dealing with difficult clients at the alterations shop where she worked. We only want her happiness. The night before the wedding, my mother had come to the apartment while Marcus was out with his groomsmen. She'd brought tea, the expensive kind she only broke out for special occasions, and we'd sat on the balcony watching the city lights flicker like earthbound stars. Are you happy? She'd asked suddenly, the question sharp as a pin dropping in a quiet room. Of course, I'd said, surprised. Why would you even ask that? She'd been quiet for a long moment, steam from her teacup rising between us like incense. Sometimes what looks like happiness from the outside feels different from within. Mom, I love him. His family has been nothing but kind. I know, she'd interrupted, unusual for her. They're very kind, very generous. She'd paused, seeming to weigh her words. Just remember that you deserve that kindness. It's not a favor they're doing you. You're not a charity case they're taking on. I don't feel like one, I'd said, but even as the words left my mouth, I'd felt that flutter again, that tiny bird of discomfort that sometimes beat its wings against my ribs when Marcus's mother complimented me on how well I'd adapted to their world, or when his father joked about how I'd certainly traded up. My mother had reached over and taken my hand, her fingers work rough but warm. You have always been enough, Anna, just as you are. Never let anyone make you feel you need to earn what should be freely given. The morning of the wedding arrived wrapped in golden light, the kind that photographers pray for. I stood at the window of the bridal suite, watching guests arrive, and felt the weight of the moment settling over me like a veil heavier than the one clipped to my hair. Below, I could see Marcus's family greeting people, his mother in pale blue that somehow managed to be just a shade lighter than mine without quite crossing into white. She moved through the crowd like a ship through calm water, everyone parting naturally to let her pass. My side of the garden looked sparser. We didn't have the extensive network of family friends, the business associates, the club members. But the people who were there, my aunt who'd driven 10 hours, my college roommate who'd flown in despite just having a baby, my mother's few close friends from the shop, they stood out in their genuine excitement, their faces bright with uncomplicated joy. The coordinator knocked. 5 minutes, Miss Anna. My mother appeared at my elbow as if summoned. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen before, deep burgundy that made her skin glow. She'd had her hair done professionally for the first time I could remember, and she looked younger, softer somehow. You look beautiful, Mom. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. This is your day. Mom, I have something for you, she said, pulling a small box from her purse. Inside was a hairpin, silver with a single pearl. It was my mother's. She wore it at her wedding. I wore it at mine. I turned so she could slide it into my hair, watching in the mirror as her fingers worked. Her face was composed, serene even, but I knew her well enough to see the tension in her jaw, the way she was holding her breath. "Mom, what's wrong?" She met my eyes in the mirror. "Nothing's wrong. Everything is going to be perfect." She adjusted the pin one final time. "There, now you're ready." The walk down the aisle felt both endless and instant. My feet moved automatically to the rhythm of the processional, but my mind was hyper-aware of every detail. The whisper of my dress against the grass, the way the sunlight caught on my grandmother's pin, the scent of gardenias heavy in the air. Marcus stood at the altar, his face soft with emotion, and for a moment all my tiny doubts evaporated like morning mist. The ceremony proceeded like a dream, all soft focus and golden light. Marcus's vows were beautiful, full of promises about partnership and building a life together. Mine were simpler, but I meant every word about choosing him, about the family we'd create. Then came the part I hadn't expected. "Before we continue," the officiant said, "the mother of the bride has asked to say a few words." I turned, surprised. This wasn't in the program. My mother rose from her seat, smoothing her dress, and walked to the microphone with the same measured pace she used for everything important. "Thank you," she began, her voice clear and steady. "When Anna was small, I used to tell her that life was about knowing what to hold tight and what to let go. Today, I watch my daughter begin her new life, and I realize that letting go is just another form of love." The crowd made that collective awe sound that wedding crowds make. Marcus squeezed my hand, but something in my mother's tone made my skin prickle with attention. "The Hendersons," she continued, nodding toward Marcus's parents, "have welcomed Anna with such generosity. The car they gave her, such a wonderful gift." She paused, and her smile widened in a way that didn't match her eyes. "And today, as Anna joins their family, we're passing that car along to Marcus as well. Because marriage is about sharing everything, isn't it? What's hers is his." She was looking directly at me as she said it, that same serene smile fixed on her face. The crowd clapped. Marcus's mother dabbed at her eyes. His father nodded approvingly. And I stood there, confused by the strange specificity of the comment, by the way my mother had emphasized certain words like she was speaking in code. "To the happy couple," my mother finished, raising her champagne glass, "may you always remember that love means never having to ask permission for what's already yours." Everyone drank. The ceremony continued. We exchanged rings, kissed, walked back down the aisle as husband and wife to the sound of cheers and handful of rose petals. But that strange moment clung to me like a burr, scratching at the edge of my consciousness even as I smiled for photos, hugged relatives, accepted congratulations. The reception was held in the club's ballroom, all crystal chandeliers and white tablecloths so thick they barely whispered when touched. I moved through it all in a kind of bubble, present but not quite there, my mother's words echoing in my head. "We're passing that car along to Marcus as well." It wasn't until 3 days later, when we returned from our brief honeymoon to Napa, a gift from his parents, of course, that I understood what she'd meant. The mail was stacked neatly on our kitchen counter, sorted the way Marcus liked it: bills, personal, junk. I was flipping through absently, still drowsy from the flight, when I found the envelope from the DMV. "What's this?" I asked, holding it up. Marcus glanced over from where he was checking his work emails. "Oh, that. The title transfer went through. Thanks for handling that before the wedding, by the way. I know it was one more thing on your plate." The words didn't make sense. They floated in the air between us like puzzle pieces that wouldn't fit together. Title transfer? "For the Civic," he said, still looking at his phone. "Your mom said you'd signed the papers already, just needed them submitted. She took care of it last week." He looked up then, maybe hearing something in my silence. "That's what she meant at the ceremony, right? About passing the car along? I thought it was a sweet gesture." I stood very still, the envelope in my hand feeling suddenly sharp, dangerous. I didn't sign anything. Marcus frowned. "Your mom said she had the papers. She said you'd discussed it, that you wanted both our names on it now that we're married." His frown deepened. "Anna, you look pale. Sit down." But I was already moving, pulling out my phone, scrolling through emails I'd been too busy to check in the weeks before the wedding. There it was, buried between venue confirmations and catering updates, an email from my mother with the subject line, "Car documentation for your records." I opened it. Attached was a PDF of a title transfer form, my signature at the bottom. Except I'd never seen this document before. The signature was close to mine, very close, but the A was wrong, the way someone would write it who'd practiced but didn't know that I always lifted my pen between the two peaks. "Anna?" Marcus was beside me now, concern radiating from him like heat. "What's wrong?" I showed him the email, the document, watched his face change as he understood. "She forged your signature?" "No," I said, and my voice sounded strange, distant. "She practiced it. This isn't just forged, it's studied. She must have been practicing for weeks." "But why? I don't understand. If you'd asked me to add you to the title, of course I would have." "That's exactly why," I said, the pieces clicking together with terrible clarity. "Because you would have asked. Because it would have been your decision. Marcus, when did you and my mother discuss this?" His silence told me everything. The color drained from his face as he realized what he was admitting. She brought it up a few weeks ago, said you were embarrassed to ask, that you felt weird about the car being only in your name when we were about to be married. She said you'd mentioned it to her, but didn't want to seem ungrateful to my parents." "And you didn't think to talk to me about it?" "She said you were stressed about the wedding, that this was one thing she could handle for you. She was being helpful, Anna. She was trying to take something off your plate." I laughed then, a sound like glass breaking. "Helpful, right." I walked to the window, needing space, needing air. The city spread out below us, all those lives being lived in parallel, all those people who weren't discovering that their mother had stolen their autonomy and gifted it to their husband like a wedding present. "Anna, this is insane. It's just a car. And we're married now. What's mine is yours, what's yours is mine. That's what marriage is." I turned to look at him, this man I'd married 3 days ago, and saw him clearly for perhaps the first time. Not cruel, not malicious, just so deeply convinced of his own reasonableness that he couldn't see the violation in what had happened. "The car was mine," I said slowly. "Your parents gave it to me, put it in my name, the one thing in this entire relationship that was just mine, not ours, not yours, mine. And my mother took that and gave it to you without asking me, and you let her? I didn't know she was forging. You knew she was handling something that should have been between us. You knew she was making decisions about my property without talking to me. What did you think was happening?" He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing. "I thought I was being supportive. She's your mother, Anna. I assumed you two had talked." "When?" I demanded. "When would we have talked about this and I would have asked her to forge my signature instead of just signing a piece of paper myself? Marcus, think about what you're saying." The silence stretched between us, taut as a wire about to snap. Finally, he said, "Okay, it was wrong. The way she did it was wrong. But Anna, the result is the same. We're married. The car belongs to both of us now anyway." "That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" His voice rose slightly, frustration creeping in. "Your mother did something misguided to try to help. She probably thought she was smoothing things over, making sure there were no awkward conversations about property and ownership. She's from a different generation, Anna. This is what marriage meant to them." I stared at him. "You really don't see it, do you? This isn't about generations or traditions. This is about control, about my mother and your family deciding what's best for me without asking what I want." "My family? What does my family have to do with your mother forging documents?" I pulled out my phone again, scrolling back further, remembering something. There, an email from Marcus's mother to mine, CC'd to me about the wedding preparations. But when I opened the full header, I could see it had originally been sent to my mother alone and only forwarded to me afterward. The original subject line, partially visible in the forward, read, "Helping Anna adjust." My hands were shaking as I searched for more, finding a pattern of communications, arrangements made about me rather than with me, discussions about the car, about the apartments, about the future that was being constructed around me like a house I'd live in but never designed. "Anna," Marcus said, his voice gentle now, placating, "you're upset. I understand. But don't you think you're overreacting a little? Your mother made a mistake. She was trying to help." "By forging my signature? By going behind my back?" "By trying to make things easier for you. She knows you, Anna. She knows you have trouble accepting help, accepting gifts. Maybe she thought..." "What? That I'd be too proud to share the car with my husband? Too selfish?" "Too independent," he said quietly. "You've always had trouble letting people take care of you." The words hung in the air between us like a confession. I saw it all then, clear as daylight, the narrative that had been constructed about me, the girl who needed to be helped into happiness, who needed to be gently guided toward the correct choices because left to my own devices, I might choose wrong. "I'm going to stay with Sadie tonight," I said, already moving toward the bedroom to pack a bag. "Anna, come on, don't be dramatic, we just got married." "And you just found out your mother-in-law committed fraud," I said, pulling clothes from drawers. "Aren't you concerned about that? Aren't you angry that she lied to you?" He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'm more concerned about my wife walking out 3 days after our wedding." "I'm not walking out. I'm taking some time to think." "In your car?" The words were soft, but they landed like a slap. I turned to look at him. "In my car?" "Our car." "Right," I said, zipping my bag. "Our car. That your parents gave to me, that my mother gave to you, that nobody ever asked me about." I picked up the keys from the counter, the same keys that had felt so heavy in my hands months ago. They felt heavier now. "I'll be back tomorrow. We need to talk about this when I'm calmer." "Anna," but I was already gone, out the door and down the hall to the elevator, my overnight bag bumping against my leg as I walked. The parking garage was cool and dim, and the Civic sat in its assigned spot, looking exactly the same as always. I ran my hand along its hood, remembering my mother doing the same thing months ago, checking it over like she was appraising its value. Sadie lived across town in a cramped studio above a Vietnamese restaurant. She answered the door in pajamas, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside without asking questions. That was Sadie. We'd been friends since college, and she knew when to talk and when to just provide wine and silence. It wasn't until the second glass that I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, her face cycling through surprise, anger, and something that looked troublingly like recognition. "You knew," I said. "You knew something was off." She sighed. "I suspected. Your mom was intense about the wedding. And Marcus's family, they kept talking about you like you were a project they were completing." "Isn't it wonderful how Anna's bloomed since joining the family?" That kind of thing. "Why didn't you say anything?" What was I going to say? "Hey, your future in-laws seem to think they're doing charity work and your mom's being weird about it? You were so happy, Anna. You seemed so sure." I thought about that, about how certain I'd been that I was choosing my life rather than being guided into it. "I need to see the emails," I said suddenly. "All of them, between my mom and his family." "How?" "My mom's email is linked to mine for recovery. She had me set it up years ago when she kept forgetting her password." I pulled out my laptop, fingers flying over the keys. It took less than 5 minutes to reset her password and get in. What I found made me sick. The emails went back months, almost to the beginning of my engagement. Marcus's mother had reached out first, suggesting lunch to discuss Anna's future. My mother had responded with enthusiasm that didn't sound like her at all, like she was playing a role she'd studied for. "Anna has always been so independent," Marcus's mother had written. "Sometimes I worry she doesn't know how to accept the advantages available to her now." "She's proud," my mother had replied. "It's my fault. I raised her to believe she had to earn everything. It's hard for her to accept that she deserves this life." "We want her to feel secure. Marcus adores her, but men need to feel needed, don't they? If Anna insists on maintaining such fierce independence, it might make him feel superfluous." I understand completely. Perhaps there are ways to help her adjust without her feeling managed. The car had been discussed extensively. Marcus's mother felt it was too much in Anna's name alone and worried it might give me the wrong idea about maintaining separate assets in marriage. My mother agreed that it would be better if the car was shared to start the marriage on the right foot. Anna won't see it that way, my mother had written. She'll think we're taking something from her. Then perhaps we don't need to trouble her with the decision. Sometimes the kindest thing is to smooth the path without drawing attention to the stones we're removing. I read that line 3 times, feeling something cold and hard forming in my chest. They'd planned it. Weeks before the wedding, they'd planned to take the choice away from me. But worse were the emails about other things, about how I dressed. Anna has such potential with the right guidance. About my job at the museum. Surely she won't want to continue working once children come. About where Marcus and I should live. The downtown apartment is fine for now, but they'll need a proper house soon in a better school district. My entire future had been mapped out in these exchanges, decided between 2 women who claimed to love me while treating me like a chess piece they were maneuvering into position. Jesus, Anna, Sadie breathed, reading over my shoulder. This is so fucked up. I found another thread, this one including Marcus's father. They were discussing the prenuptial agreement Marcus and I had signed. Or rather, hadn't signed, because Marcus had said he didn't believe in them. But here was his father saying that the lack of prenup was strategic, that Anna's assets are negligible anyway, and this way she'll feel more secure in the marriage. My assets, my negligible assets. My security that needed to be managed and maintained by people who knew better. I need to go back further, I said, scrolling through older emails. And there it was, an exchange from just after Marcus and I started dating. She's perfect for him, his mother had written to someone I didn't recognize. Educated enough to be presentable, from a humble enough background to be grateful. She'll give us beautiful grandchildren, and she won't cause problems like Catherine did. Catherine, Marcus's ex-girlfriend, the one he'd said was too high maintenance, too demanding. I wondered now what she demanded. Respect? Autonomy? The right to make her own choices? My phone rang. Marcus. Don't answer it, Sadie said, but I did. Hello? Anna, where are you? I went to Sadie's and you weren't there. I looked at Sadie, who shrugged. Of course he'd gone there first. It's where I always went when I needed space. Predictable Anna, following her patterns. I'm fine. I need more time. Your mother's here, he said. She wants to talk to you. She says she can explain. Of course she was there. Of course they were together. The 2 people who'd collaborated in managing my life. Put her on. There was shuffling, then my mother's voice, careful and measured as always. Anna, sweetheart, you're upset. I read the emails, Mom. Silence. Then, which emails? All of them. Every single one. I know about the planning, the discussions about my future, the decisions you made without me. Everything I did was for your own good. My own good? I laughed, bitter. You committed fraud for my own good? It's not fraud when it's family. I was simplifying things, making sure you didn't sabotage your own happiness with your pride. My pride or my autonomy? Anna, you don't understand what it was like, watching you struggle all those years, working so hard for so little when Marcus's family was offering you everything. The car was a symbol, don't you see? Keeping it separate was like keeping 1 foot out the door. Maybe I wanted 1 foot out the door. Maybe that was my choice to make. You don't mean that. Her voice was harder now, the steel showing through. You love Marcus. His family has welcomed you with open arms. Do you know how rare that is? Do you know what I would have given for that kind of acceptance when I was your age? And there it was, the heart of it. This wasn't about me at all. It was about her, about the life she'd never had, the security she never felt. She was living vicariously through my marriage, grabbing at stability with both hands and dragging me along with her. Mom, I said quietly, I'm not you. No, she agreed, you're not. You have opportunities I never had, and I'll be damned if I watch you throw them away because you're too proud to share a car with your husband. It's not about the car, isn't it? She sounded tired suddenly, older. Anna, what do you think you're fighting for here? The right to keep things from your husband? The ability to leave whenever you want? That's not marriage, sweetheart. Marriage is about becoming one unit, one family. Marriage is about choosing to become those things, I said, not having that choice taken away. She sighed. You always were too idealistic. The world doesn't work on ideals, Anna. It works on practicalities. And practically speaking, you have a good man who loves you, a family that's welcomed you, and a life most people would kill for. Don't throw it away over a philosophical argument about choice. I hung up. Sadie was staring at me. Your mom's kind of terrifying. Yeah, I agreed. I'm just now figuring that out. I stayed at Sadie's for 3 days, calling in sick to work, ignoring the increasingly frantic texts from Marcus and my mother. I needed time to think, to process what I'd learned, to figure out what came next. On the 3rd night, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I created a fake email account and reached out to Catherine, Marcus's ex. I said I was a journalist writing about modern relationships and had heard she had insights about navigating family dynamics in high-pressure relationships. It was thin, but she responded. We met at a coffee shop downtown, one of those aggressively hip places with exposed brick and Edison bulbs. She was beautiful in a sharp way, all angles and perfect posture, the kind of woman who looked like she'd never doubted herself in her life. You're Anna, she said as soon as I sat down. It wasn't a question. How did you? Marcus has a type, she said, stirring her latte with deliberate precision, and his mother has a type for him. You fit it better than I did. She looked me over with an appraising eye. Softer edges, more malleable, or so they thought. I don't know what you mean. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Yes, you do, or you wouldn't be here pretending to be a journalist. She leaned forward. Let me guess. They've started making decisions for you. Small ones at first. Where to live, what to drive, how to dress. They frame it as generosity, as love, as wanting the best for you. I nodded, unable to speak. And your family, mother, I'm guessing, she's thrilled. She sees it as you moving up in the world, gaining security. She's probably more invested in the relationship than you are. How do you know all this? Because I lived it for 2 years, Catherine said. The only difference is my family had money too. I had options. When I pushed back, when I insisted on maintaining my own bank account, my own car, my own friends, they called me difficult, cold, ungrateful. She took a sip of her latte. Marcus isn't a bad man, Anna. That's what makes it so hard. He genuinely believes he's taking care of you. His family genuinely believes they're helping. They can't conceive of a world where their help isn't wanted or needed. What happened? Why did you leave? I didn't, she said simply. They left me. Or rather, they collectively decided I wasn't the right fit for Marcus after all. Too independent, too stubborn. His mother actually said to me, we need someone who understands that marriage is about compromise. What she meant was, they needed someone who would compromise everything while Marcus compromised nothing. So what do I do? Catherine studied me for a long moment. That depends. What do you want? Really want? Not what you think you should want or what would make everyone else happy. I thought about it. Really thought about it. I want my car back. I want my choices back. I want a marriage where I'm a partner, not a project. Then you know what you have to do, she said. But Anna, they won't make it easy. They'll make you feel crazy, ungrateful, selfish. They'll use every emotional manipulation in the book. Your mother will probably be the worst. She has the most to lose if you leave their world. She forged my signature, I said. That's illegal. Sure, Catherine agreed. But will you really have your mother arrested? They know you won't. That's why they feel safe doing it. She was right. I wouldn't have my mother arrested, but there were other forms of justice, quieter ones, that didn't involve courtrooms, but carried their own kind of weight. I went back to the apartment that night. Marcus was in the living room, laptop open, working even at 9 p.m. He looked up when I came in, relief flooding his face. "Anna, thank God, I've been so worried." "We need to talk," I said, sitting across from him rather than beside him. The distance felt necessary. "Okay," he said, closing the laptop. "I'm listening." "I want the car transferred back to my name only." His face went through several expressions before settling on confusion. "Anna, we just discussed this. It doesn't matter whose name." "It matters to me. If it doesn't matter to you, then there should be no problem transferring it back." "But why? What's the point?" "The point is that it was mine. The point is that the decision to share it should have been mine. The point is that I should have been asked." He sighed, running his hands through his hair. "This is about control." "Yes," I agreed. "It is. Control over my own life, my own property, my own choices." "Anna, marriage means giving up some control. It means trusting your partner." "Do you trust me?" I interrupted. "Of course I do." "Then trust me when I say I need this. Trust me to know what I need to feel secure in this marriage." He was quiet for a long moment. "And if I say no, if I think this is ridiculous and refuse to engage with it, then we have a bigger problem than a car. Are you threatening me 3 days after our wedding?" "I'm being honest with you," I said, "which is more than you and my mother did for me." His jaw tightened. "I've been nothing but honest with you. You had secret discussions with my mother about my property." "They weren't secret." "Did you tell me about them?" "I thought she would." "So they were secret." I pulled out my phone, showed him screenshots. "Of the emails, your parents have been planning our life without my input since we got engaged, maybe before. They discuss me like I'm a project they're working on together." He looked at the emails, his face paling slightly. "These are private conversations. About me. I have a right to know what's being said about me, what's being planned for me." "This is insane," he said, pushing the phone away. "You're taking normal family communications and turning them into some kind of conspiracy." "Normal? It's normal for your mother to discuss my negligible assets, to plan how to make me more dependent on you?" "She didn't mean it like that." "How did she mean it, Marcus? Explain to me how discussing ways to ensure I can't leave easily is loving behavior." He stood up, pacing to the window. "You're twisting everything. My parents love you. They've given you everything." "They've given me things," I corrected. "Things with strings. Things with conditions. Things that weren't really gifts at all, but loans against future compliance." "That's not fair." "Isn't it? Tell me, Marcus, if I keep working at the museum after we have kids, what will your parents say?" He turned to face me. "They'd want what's best for our children." "Which is me at home." "Not necessarily." "Yes, necessarily. It's in the emails, Marcus. Your mother has already decided I'll quit work. She's already planning which preschools our hypothetical children will attend. She's already chosen the neighborhood where we'll buy a house. And you know what? I bet if I asked you, you'd say these are all just suggestions, just loving guidance from people with more experience. But we both know they're not suggestions, they're expectations. And if I don't meet them, I'll be the difficult one, the ungrateful one, the one who doesn't understand how lucky she is." "You're being paranoid." "Am I? Then let's test it. Tell your parents we're not planning on having kids for 5 years. Tell them I'm applying for a promotion at the museum that would require travel. Tell them we're thinking about moving to a different city for my career. See how supportive they are." His silence was answer enough. "I want the car back in my name," I repeated, "and I want us to see a counselor. Someone neutral who can help us figure out how to have a marriage that belongs to us, not to our families." "You want me to go to therapy because your mother forged your signature?" "I want us to go to therapy because you don't see why that's a problem." He stared at me for a long moment. "And if I refuse? Then I'll know where I stand, and I'll make my decisions accordingly." It took 2 weeks of arguments, tears, and silence, but eventually Marcus agreed to both the car transfer and the counseling. His parents were furious, though they tried to hide it behind concern. "We just worry Anna's going through something," his mother said to him on a call I wasn't supposed to overhear. "This isn't like her." No, I thought, this is exactly like me. You just never bothered to know me. My mother was worse. She showed up at the apartment when Marcus was at work, using the key I'd forgotten she had. "You're ruining everything," she said without preamble. "Do you understand that? You're destroying your marriage over pride." "I'm trying to save my marriage," I said, "by making sure it's actually mine." "Yours?" she laughed bitterly. "Nothing in this life is just yours, Anna. Everything is connected. Everything has consequences. Your selfishness affects everyone who loves you." "My selfishness? Mom, you committed fraud. You literally stole from me." "I gave you a gift," she said. "I gave you a smooth path to happiness, and you're determined to put rocks back in your way." "They're my rocks," I said. "My path, my choice." "Your choice," she repeated, shaking her head. "You sound like a child. Adults understand that sometimes choices are made for us, and we make the best of them." "Is that what you did?" I asked. "Made the best of choices that were made for you?" Something shifted in her face, a crack in the facade. "Yes," she said quietly, "that's exactly what I did. And I survived. I raised you. I gave you opportunities I never had. And I'm grateful," I said. "But Mom, I don't want to just survive. I want to live my own life, not the one you planned for me." She stood up, gathering her purse. "You'll regret this. When Marcus leaves you because you're too difficult, when his family turns their backs on you, when you're alone with your precious autonomy, you'll understand what you threw away." "Maybe," I said. "But at least it will be my regret to have." She left without another word. We didn't speak for 3 months after that. The counseling was hard, harder than I'd expected. Marcus genuinely couldn't understand why I couldn't just let things go and be happy with what we have. The counselor, a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Patel, had to repeatedly redirect him from talking about what his parents thought to what he thought. "But they have more experience," he'd say. "They know what works in a marriage." "Their marriage isn't your marriage," Dr. Patel would respond patiently. "What works for them might not work for you and Anna." It took 6 sessions before Marcus finally said, "I guess I always assumed Anna would want what my mother wants. They seemed to get along so well during the wedding planning." "Did you ever ask Anna what she wanted?" Dr. Patel asked. I assumed she'd tell me if she wanted something different." "But when she did tell you, about the car, for instance, what was your response?" He was quiet for a long time. I thought she was being ridiculous. "So you discouraged her from telling you when she wanted something different?" It was like watching someone solve a puzzle in real time, seeing the pieces click together on his face. "Oh," he said quietly. "Oh, shit." That was the beginning of real change. Slow, painful, imperfect change, but change nonetheless. The car was transferred back to my name. Marcus told his parents it was for insurance reasons, which they clearly didn't believe but couldn't argue with. His mother called me, her voice dripping with concern. "Anna, dear, I hope you know we only want what's best for you both." "I know you believe that," I said carefully. "Believe it? Of course we believe it. We love you like a daughter." "Then treat me like an adult daughter," I said, "not a child who needs guidance." She was quiet for a moment. "We never meant to overstep." It was the closest to an apology I'd get, and we both knew it. My mother and I didn't reconcile for 6 months. When we finally did, it was tentative, careful, like approaching a wounded animal. She never apologized for the forgery, but she stopped trying to manage my life, and that was its own kind of apology. Marcus and I moved out of the downtown apartment, finding a smaller place that we chose together that neither set of parents had seen before we signed the lease. It was ours in a way nothing else had been, and that made it precious. But the damage was deep, and some cracks, once formed, never fully heal. It was a Tuesday, ordinary in every way, when I realized the marriage was over. Marcus had come home from work talking about a case, and somehow it turned into a story about his parents' neighbors, and then about how his mother thought we should consider moving to their neighborhood when the time was right. "She's already talked to a realtor," he said, not looking at me, knowing how I'd react, just to get a sense of the market. I put down my wine glass very carefully. "We've discussed this." "I know, but she was just trying to be helpful." "Marcus," I said. "Look at me." He did, and I saw it in his eyes, the exhaustion of constantly navigating between me and his parents, the resentment that I made it necessary, the wish that I could just be easier, more compliant, more like the woman they'd all imagined I was. "I can't do this anymore," I said. "Can't do what?" "Anna, she was just looking at houses." "No," I said, "I can't do this. The marriage. I can't spend my life fighting to be seen as a full person. I can't keep having the same conversation over and over. I can't watch you choose them every time while pretending you're choosing us. That's not fair, isn't it?" I stood up, surprised by how calm I felt. "When was the last time you told your mother no? Really no, not 'we'll think about it' or 'maybe later', but actual no?" He couldn't answer. "I want a divorce," I said. The word hung between us like a blade. "Anna, you can't be serious. Because my mother looked at houses?" "Because you let her. Because you told me about it like it was normal. Because after everything, all the counseling, all the conversations, you still don't see me as a complete person with the right to make my own choices." "That's not true." "Then why didn't you tell her to stop? Why didn't you say, 'Mom, Anna and I will look at houses when we're ready'? Why is it always me who has to be the difficult one, the one setting boundaries, the one saying no?" He rubbed his face, suddenly looking older. "Because it's easier." "Easier for who?" "For everyone." "For everyone but me," I said quietly. "And that's the problem, Marcus. In every equation, in every decision, I'm the variable that can be adjusted to make things work. My comfort, my autonomy, my desires, they're all negotiable if it makes things easier for everyone else." "I don't think of you that way." "No," I agreed. "You don't think of me at all. You think of us as a unit, but it's a unit where your family's wishes are constants and mine are suggestions." He stood up too, anger finally showing. "So you're just giving up after everything we've worked through?" "We haven't worked through anything," I said. "We've just gotten better at managing the symptoms. The disease is still there." "The disease? Our families caring about us is a disease?" "Your family's version of caring is control, and you either can't or won't see the difference." "And what about your mother? She literally committed fraud." "And I dealt with that. I set boundaries. I hold her accountable. When was the last time you held your parents accountable for anything?" He had no answer. The divorce was surprisingly civil. His parents were shocked, of course. His mother called me, crying, asking what she'd done wrong. "You loved me the only way you knew how," I told her, "but it wasn't the way I needed to be loved." "I don't understand," she said. "I know," I said. "That's part of the problem." My mother was silent when I told her. Then she said, "I suppose you blame me." "Partially," I admitted, "but I mostly blame myself for not speaking up sooner, for thinking I could reshape myself to fit into their world without losing pieces of who I am." "So what now?" she asked. "You're alone? No husband? No security?" "I have a job," I said, "an apartment, friends. A life that's entirely mine." "And the car?" she asked, and there was something almost amused in her voice. "Still mine," I said, "only mine." She laughed then, a sound I hadn't heard in months. "You always were stubborn." "I learned from the best." "I suppose you did." It took us another year to really reconcile, to find a way to be mother and daughter without the weight of expectations and manipulations. She never fully understood my choice to leave Marcus, but she learned to respect it, which was more than I'd hoped for. The day the divorce was finalized, I drove the Civic to the coast. It was a 3-hour drive to a beach I'd never been to, chosen simply because I'd seen a photo and liked the way the cliffs looked. I parked and walked down to the sand, letting the salt air fill my lungs. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and amber, and I thought about that morning before my wedding, standing in another golden light, feeling the weight of expectations settling over me like a veil. I'd thought that weight was love, that the pressure was just the gravity of being cared for so intensely. But real love, I'd learned, doesn't weigh you down, it lifts you up. It doesn't reshape you, it makes space for your own shape. It doesn't take your choices, it multiplies them. My phone buzzed. A text from Sadie. How's the Freedom Road trip? I took a photo of the sunset and sent it to her. Free, I wrote. Finally free. The ocean crashed against the shore, endless and indifferent, and I stood there until the sun disappeared completely, until the first stars appeared, until the world remade itself in darkness and distant lights. When I finally walked back to the car, the keys felt light in my hand. Just keys, nothing more. I started the engine and pulled back onto the highway, heading nowhere in particular, just driving because I could, because the car was mine, because the choice was mine, because the road ahead belonged to no one but me. 5 years have passed since that night on the beach. 5 years since I chose myself over the life that had been chosen for me. The Civic finally died last year, transmission failure that would cost more to fix than the car was worth. I sold it for scrap, keeping only the keys as a reminder. They sit in a small box on my dresser, next to my grandmother's pearl pin, the one my mother had placed in my hair on my wedding day. I see my mother regularly now. We have lunch once a month, always at a restaurant, always in neutral territory. She's older, softer somehow, though the steel is still there underneath. She never remarried after my father left when I was young, and I understand now that my marriage to Marcus had been her chance to live vicariously through me, to have the security she'd never found for herself. Do you regret it? She asked me recently, over Vietnamese food at a place near my new apartment. The divorce? All of it. The marriage, the divorce, the way things happened. I thought about it. I regret not trusting myself sooner. I regret letting other people's dreams become my compass. But no, I don't regret the experience. It taught me who I am. And who are you? She asked, genuinely curious. Someone who owns her own choices, I said, even the mistakes. She smiled then, a real smile, not the performed one from my wedding day. You're stronger than I was at your age. I had a different kind of teacher, I said, and meant it kindly. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm sorry about the car, she said, the first time she'd ever directly acknowledged it. I thought I was helping. I know, I said, that's what made it so hard to forgive. Marcus remarried 2 years ago. I saw the announcement in the Times. His parents still send them to me. I'm not sure why. His new wife is lovely, an attorney from his firm who probably understands his world in ways I never could. In the wedding photo, she's wearing a smile I recognize, bright, grateful, carefully calibrated. I hope she's stronger than she looks, or maybe I hope she doesn't need to be. I never remarried. I've dated, had relationships that lasted months or years, but I've never again felt the need to legally bind myself to another person. The freedom to leave, I've learned, is what makes staying meaningful. Choice, renewed daily, is its own form of commitment. I work at a different museum now, heading the education department. It's work I love, creating programs that make art accessible to kids who might never otherwise see it. My mother comes sometimes, standing in the back of the room while I lead tours, and I can see pride in her face, not for who she wanted me to be, but for who I am. The car, that silver Civic that caused so much trouble, became something of a legend among my friends. Anna's freedom car, Sadie calls it when she tells the story to people who didn't know me then. The car that broke the camel's back. But it was never about the car, not really. It was about ownership, not of things, but of self. Sometimes I drive past the country club where I got married. They've renovated it since then, made it even grander, even more intimidating to girls like I was. I wonder about the weddings that happen there now, about the promises being made, the families being joined, the futures being planned. I wonder how many brides stand at those altars thinking they're choosing their lives, not realizing how many choices have already been made for them. My mother was right about one thing. I did drive away with my precious autonomy, but she was wrong about me being alone with it. I'm surrounded by people who see me, who value my opinions, who ask before assuming, who love me without needing to reshape me. It's a smaller life than the one Marcus's family offered, simpler with fewer guarantees. But it's mine, every imperfect inch of it. I keep a picture from my wedding day tucked in a book I rarely open. In it, I'm standing between my mother and Marcus's mother, all three of us smiling. If you didn't know the story, you'd think we were three women united in joy, celebrating love and new beginnings. You wouldn't see the calculations behind my mother's smile, the satisfaction behind my mother-in-law's, the naive hope behind mine. But I see it all now, every layer of that moment. I see the woman I was, desperate to please, to belong, to be loved. I see the woman they wanted me to become, grateful, compliant, a smooth stone in the family setting. And I see, in the corner of my own smile, the tiny seed of the woman I am now, someone who knows that love without respect is just control wearing a kinder mask. The keys to the Civic sit in their box, tarnishing slowly. Sometimes I pick them up, feel their weight, remember that day Marcus surprised me in the parking garage, the day my mother circled the car like an appraiser, the day I drove to the beach alone. They're just keys to a dead car, worthless now, but they're also more than that. They're evidence that I once had something that was mine, that someone tried to take it without asking, and that I fought to get it back. That's the thing about ownership. It's not really about the object. It's about the right to decide what happens to it, the right to give it away or keep it close, to share it or protect it, to let it rust or make it shine. Those rights, I learned, are what make us free. My mother gave Marcus the car at my wedding, thinking she was giving me security, stability, a smoother path to happiness. But in trying to take my freedom, she gave me something more valuable, the knowledge that it was mine to fight for. The understanding that autonomy isn't selfish, it's essential. The realization that the most important thing you can own is your own life. She gave him the car, but I drove away with what mattered, my truth and my peace. The ocean is still there. The beach where I stood that day watching the sunset on my marriage and rise on my new life. I go back sometimes, different seasons, different lights, but the same sand, the same endless water, the same reminder that some things are too vast to be owned, too free to be controlled. I park whatever car I'm driving now, a used Subaru I bought with my own money, chose with my own criteria, registered in only my own name, and walk down to the water. The wind is always blowing there, constant and wild, and I let it tangle my hair, fill my lungs, remind me that I am here by choice, always by choice, every moment a decision to stay or go, to accept or refuse, to be who I am or who others want me to be. The wedding feels like something that happened to another person now, a story I heard once about a girl who almost disappeared into someone else's life. But the lessons remain, carved into me like initials in tree bark, growing clearer as I grow older. Love is not ownership. Care is not control. Generosity with strings is not a gift. And sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to be loved in the wrong way. My mother understands this now, I think. Or at least she's learned to pretend she does, which is its own kind of growth. We don't talk about the forgery, the betrayal, the months of silence between us. We talk about my work, her health, the books we're reading, the shows we're watching. Safe subjects that let us be mother and daughter without having to examine what that meant when it mattered most. But sometimes, when she thinks I'm not looking, I catch her watching me with something like awe, as if she can't quite believe I became who I am, despite, or because of, everything she did. As if my freedom is both a rejection of her choices and a validation of them. She gave me the tools to break free, even if she never meant for me to use them on the cage she helped build. The last time I saw Marcus was at a mutual friend's party 2 years ago. He was there with his new wife, Rebecca, and they looked good together, matched, coordinated, like a set of expensive bookends. He introduced us awkwardly, and I shook her hand, noting the engagement ring, his grandmother's, reset, the wedding band, platinum, naturally, the careful way she stood, slightly behind him, always. "I have heard so much about you," Rebecca said, which was both polite and revealing. "All good, I hope," I replied, which was both a joke and a test. She smiled, perfect teeth, perfect timing. "Marcus says you're very independent." There it was, the word they'd settled on to explain me. Independent. Not difficult or ungrateful or selfish, but independent. Like it was a quirk, a personality trait, something amusing and ultimately irrelevant. "I am," I agreed. "It's one of my better qualities." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Rebecca's smile tightened slightly, and I excused myself to get another drink, leaving them to their matched set life. Later that night, Marcus found me on the balcony. "She's nice," he said, as if I'd asked. "She seems lovely." "She's easier," he said, then caught himself. "I mean, I know what you mean," I said, and I did. Rebecca was easier because she'd been raised for this, trained for it, like a show dog who knows exactly how to stand, how to move, how to be. She didn't have to be taught to be grateful for what the Hendersons offered because she came from the same world. It wasn't a step up for her, it was a lateral move. "Are you happy?" he asked, and for a moment he sounded like the man I'd fallen in love with, the one who existed before his family's expectations calcified around him. "I am," I said. "Are you?" He thought about it for longer than someone happily married should need to. "It's easier," he repeated finally. "Easier isn't the same as happier." "No," he agreed, "but sometimes easier is enough." I felt sorry for him then, this man who would always choose the path of least resistance, who would always pick comfort over truth, smooth over meaningful. He'd never know the joy of being fully himself because he'd never risk the discomfort of disappointing the people who claimed to love him. "I hope it stays easy for you," I said, meaning it. "Anna," he started, then stopped. "The car thing, I get it now, why it mattered so much." "Do you?" "It wasn't about the car." "No," I agreed. "It never was. I should have transferred it back when you asked, the first time you asked." "Yes," I said. "You should have." "Would it have made a difference?" "If I had?" I thought about it, really considered the alternate timeline where Marcus had immediately agreed, had stood up to his parents, had chosen my autonomy over their expectations. "Maybe," I said, "but probably not. The car was just the symptom. The disease went deeper." He nodded, looking out at the city lights. "Rebecca doesn't drive," he said suddenly. "Never learned. Says she doesn't need to in the city." I almost laughed at the perfection of it. Of course she didn't drive. Driving meant the ability to leave, to go somewhere without explanation or permission. Rebecca would never need that ability because she'd never want to leave. She'd been born in the cage Marcus's family offered. It probably felt like home to her. "That's convenient," I said, neutrally. "Yeah," he said, but something in his voice suggested he was beginning to understand that convenient and right weren't synonyms. We stood there in silence for a moment, two people who had once promised to love each other forever, who had stood in front of family and friends and God and made vows we couldn't keep. Not because we didn't mean them at the time, but because we'd been different people then, or rather I'd been trying to be a different person, the one everyone wanted me to be. "I should get back," he said finally. "You should." He started to leave, then turned back. "Your mother sent us a wedding gift, Rebecca and me, a crystal vase. It was nice." "She's gotten very good at nice," I said. "You've forgiven her?" "I've accepted her," I said. "There's a difference." He nodded and left, returning to his easier life, his matching set marriage, his world where everything made sense as long as no one asked too many questions. I stayed on the balcony, breathing in the night air, feeling the freedom of standing alone by choice rather than circumstance. That's what they never understood. My mother, Marcus, his family, they saw being alone as failure, as something to be fixed or avoided. They couldn't conceive of solitude as sovereignty, of independence as its own form of wealth. They measured success in terms of attachment, belonging, being claimed. I measure it in terms of freedom, choice, the ability to walk away from anything that demands I be less than I am. The Civic is gone now, sold for scrap, its parts probably recycled into a dozen different cars, carrying a dozen different people to a dozen different futures. But sometimes I dream about it. In the dreams, I'm driving that coastal highway again, the one I took after the divorce was finalized. But this time, I'm not alone. The car is full of all the women I've been, the eager bride, the bewildered wife, the angry divorcee, the woman learning to be alone, the woman learning to be free. We're all there, all the versions of me, driving together towards something that might be a sunset or might be a sunrise. It doesn't matter which. What matters is that we're moving, that we chose the direction, that our hands are on the wheel. In the dream, my mother is sometimes in the rearview mirror, standing on the side of the road, getting smaller and smaller but never disappearing completely. Sometimes she's smiling, sometimes she's crying, sometimes she's just watching with that intensity she's always had, as if she could protect me through observation. "I'm okay, Mom," I call out in the dream, though she can't hear me. "I'm okay." And I am. Not perfect, not always happy, not living the life she planned for me or the one I planned for myself, but living my life, the one I choose every morning when I wake up alone in my own bed, in my own apartment, with my own name on the lease. The keys to the Civic still sit in their box, tarnished now beyond recognition. I could throw them away. They're just metal, after all, keys to nothing, opening no doors. But I keep them as a reminder, a talisman, a symbol of the first time I said, "This is mine," and meant it, fought for it, refused to let it be given away without my consent. My mother was wrong about many things, but she was right about one. We were passing the car along. We were passing along assumptions about what women owe the people who love them. We were passing along the idea that gratitude means giving up your agency. We were passing along the notion that marriage requires the smaller person to become smaller still, while the larger person expands to fill the space. But some things don't have to be passed along. Some cycles can be broken. Some gifts can be refused. She gave him the car, but I drove away with what mattered, my truth and my peace. And that old silver Civic, wherever its pieces are now, scattered across junkyards or reformed into something new, carries with it the ghost of a woman learning to own herself. Every mile I drove in that car was a choice. Every turn was a decision. Every time I put the key in the ignition, I was saying, "This is mine. I decide where I go." That's all any of us really want, isn't it? The right to decide where we go, the right to choose our passengers, our destination, our speed, the right to pull over when we're tired, to take the scenic route when we want to turn around when we realize we're going the wrong way. My mother thought she was giving me security when she handed my autonomy to Marcus. She thought she was ensuring my happiness, my safety, my belonging. But security built on surrender isn't security at all. It's just a prettier kind of prison. And happiness that requires you to betray yourself isn't happiness. It's just fear wearing a smile. I think about the woman I would have become if I'd stayed in that marriage, if I'd accepted the transfer as a gift, if I'd let them reshape me into someone more convenient. She would have a bigger house, certainly, a newer car. Children by now, probably, enrolled in the right preschools, their futures already mapped out in email exchanges between grandmothers. She would have security, stability, the kind of life that looks perfect in Christmas card photos. But she wouldn't have what I have, the knowledge that every single thing in my life is here because I chose it, the bone-deep understanding that I belong to myself. The freedom that comes from knowing you can survive walking away from everything that asks you to be less than you are. That's worth more than any car, any marriage, any promise of security that comes with conditions. It's worth the years of silence with my mother, the confused looks from relatives who don't understand why I couldn't just make it work, the moments of loneliness that come with choosing yourself over choosing easy. Because here's what I learned, what the car taught me, what the divorce confirmed, what the years since have proven. The only thing you really own in this life is your right to choose. everything else, money, property, relationships, even love, can be taken away, transferred, forged into something else. But your choices, your actual choices, not the ones made for you or around you or despite you, those are yours forever. My mother gave Marcus the car at our wedding, but she gave me something more valuable, though she never meant to. She gave me a reason to fight for myself. She gave me the gift of discovering that I could survive betrayal, loneliness, the loss of everything I thought I needed. She gave me the chance to learn that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is refuse to be loved wrong. The car is gone, Marcus is gone, the life everyone planned for me is gone, but I'm still here, driving my own roads, choosing my own directions, arriving at my own destinations. The keys in the box aren't keys to anything anymore, but they're proof that once there was something that was mine, and when someone tried to give it away, I took it back. That's all any of us can do, really. Take back what's ours, even if it's just the right to say, this is my life. These are my choices. This is my story. She gave him the car, but I drove away with what mattered, my truth and my peace.